Welcome to the Voxgig podcast. We talk to people in the developer community about developer relations, public speaking, and community events. For more details, visit voxgig.com/podcast. All right, let's get started. If you want to know what developer relations can learn from Guns N' Roses, this is the episode for you. Today, I'm talking to PJ Hagerty, who was one of those people who was there at the dawn of developer relations. We talk about how his time in a band, not Guns N' Roses, but a pretty cool band nonetheless, helped him understand community. We talk about how in the early days of developer relations, we're only talking 10 years ago, we were all just kind of making it up. We talk about one of the greatest conferences that ever happened, Distill on Treasure Island, run by Engine Yard in 2014, and still talked about to this day. But this episode is really about the journey into developer relations. A lot of people these days would like to work as a DevRel, but how do you get there? Where do you start? And what ethos do you need to bring to the work to make it successful? Well, let's talk to PJ and find out. PJ, welcome to the Fireside with Voxgig podcast. It is great to have you here today, all the way from Buffalo, New York.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I mean, this is definitely much better than shoveling snow, which is what I'd be doing right now.
I was thinking maybe, because we were talking before we started, maybe we'll just scrap the DevRel stuff and just talk about Guns N' Roses.
We could go on. Yeah, there's a long history of Guns N' Roses in the Buffalo, New York community that we could get into. I don't know if that's what the listeners want, though.
Yeah, let's come back to that one. So a lot of people ask me, how do you get into DevRel? A lot of people, I don't know, maybe they like the lifestyle. All that travel kind of sucks, by the way. But it's very rewarding career because you are doing things for people and you're meeting tons of interesting people and you're learning new ideas all the time. It's one of the things that attracted me to it when I was doing it in my previous work. And you've ended up doing it, but you had this really long multi-stage journey. And I think it's sort of an archetype, maybe.
Yeah, it's almost like a gigantic Hollywood style epic. Like it's like it's Spielbergian in nature. The story of how I got into DevRel.
A 3-act structure, maybe.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean,
well, okay, let's start at the start, right? So, how did you get into tech, and then did you make deliberate choices, or did stuff just happen to you? Let's go all the way back.
It's kind of a combination of both. Like when I was very young, I was interested in technology, and we're talking like VCRs. Like people didn't have home computers, but like things like VCRs fascinated me. I'm like, why does this work? Why does my Walkman work the way that it does? I'm just curious, and I would often take things apart, not really realizing that I did not have the skills to put them back together.
You have a dead right?
Yeah, I do. The part, because this isn't video, the part you can't see is the number of broken technology items I have in the room around me. But, to me, it was always interesting to see how people interacted. And I was lucky enough that when I was about 7 or 8 years old, my grandmother opened a bank account and was given a Texas Instruments computer that she could plug into the back of her television set and use regular like Dolby cassette tapes to record and balance her checkbook. She had no interest in this whatsoever. So I took the little book that came with it that had BASIC, and it was, some basic programs written in BASIC. You could make snowfall on the screen. You could do some, easy arithmetic on it. And I was like, this is so cool. This is super cool. But like, there's not a whole lot of use cases for that when you're 8 years old. So that kind of got boring after a while, and I put it aside. On the other side of things in my life, like I've always been fascinated by music. I love making music. I love playing music. I love listening to music. I'm obsessed with it. It's my true passion. So I'd often go back to that and then go back to technology. How does an electric guitar work? When someone goes into a studio, how does that whole system work? And I would look into that. So I was lucky enough to go to a very special high school. It's closed now, but it's called the Buffalo Academy of Science and Mathematics. And there they had a programming course. we would learn Turbo Pascal 5.5, and I've heavily dated myself simply by saying those words.
This is in high school, right?
This is in high school. Yeah. I was probably about 14 years old at this point. And they had a library program where you could check out a so-called portable computer. So me being 14, I weighed about maybe 80 pounds. Maybe let's say I weighed about 36 kilo. The computer that I was supposed to bring home weighed about 8 or 9 kilo. So it was easily about like half my weight. Like it was a significant amount of weight. It was heavy. It was cantankerous. You had to load up with discs, but man, you were the coolest kid in the world because you were on the bus with a computer with a battery life that lasted a good 10 minutes. Library. Yeah. From our library. Yeah.
Let's check it out.
Yeah, you check it out like a book. It was the school's library, not like a public library.
Okay.
But yeah, first place to have that program is super exciting, and we would do that. And later, because we had taken these courses and finished our math requirements, we were able to take a telecourse in calculus. So remote learning, pre-Zoom. This is 1993. In my last year of high school, and we're taking calculus on a computer in a remote classroom over a speakerphone with a shared chalkboard. And like these kind of things have always fascinated me. So at that point in time, I was playing in bands. I was doing some computer stuff on the side. We'd gotten a good old Windows 3.1 computer, 386 that I took, and I ran Norton Commander on it and started getting on BBSs. And that's where the social computer aspect kind of started.
Yeah.
But learning how to program, what's HTML, how do you backdoor, maybe getting into a little trouble with the law, things like that. And having some meetings with people that I didn't want to have meetings with. But we don't need to talk about that. That's a whole other story. But yeah, I graduated, went to college, and realized I didn't like college. I wanted to be in a band. So I did that for a few years, just kind of completely left technology behind. But being in a band has this huge social aspect to it. You need to be very, very ingrained with the community that is your listeners, your fans, and understanding what they need and what they want. So I did that for a while, came back to the world of technology in the early 2000s when I moved away. I moved back to Buffalo to start a family and realized I should probably get a degree because that's a thing you're supposed to do, right? I mean, that's, if you are a person of a certain age, there's an expectation that you will go to college and get a degree. So I did that. And I, of course, went with programming because it was the easy default. I already kind of knew how to do it. I kind of stayed in touch with my tech skills over time. I said, all right, let's go for this. So I did, graduated, worked as a programmer for a while, building websites on the side, consulting, as well as working, I was working in a deaf school for a while as their webmaster, went in and started building, commercial applications with an academic company, which is a lot of fun. And then this opportunity to work at a company called Engineer had come around. At this time, I'd been coding in Ruby for about 3 or 4 years. I loved the community, and Engineer was always at these community events. And so I said, I'd love to go. Moved over to Engineer, and a couple months later, I went to a conference called Steel City Ruby, and that's where the whole game changed. There was a gentleman in the Ruby community named Jim Wyrick. And Jim was like Santa Claus of Hello World, is the best way to describe him. Every time he gave a talk, and this man was late 50s, early 60s, well into his career, and he would get up and say, hey, I made this AR drone do this, and it was so amazing to me that I got to lift off the ground and land back down. He was so excited that Hello World was everything that he did. And he could deeply explain to you the guts. He created Rake, which is make for Ruby. This guy was not.
Oh, wow. Okay. That was that guy.
Richard, I think you met him because he was at Distill as well. But
yes, I think I remember.
Yeah, just a great guy. And whenever we would drive to a conference or it was easily portable, he would say, hey, bring your guitar. We'll skip lunch. We'll play guitar in the hotel lobby or wherever. And he was one of those people knew all of the chords to all of the songs. And I am not a skilled guitar player. I'm a drummer by trade. But I'd never give up, never pass up the opportunity to go play with Jim. So we were kind of sitting there jamming, and another friend of ours, Corey Haynes, came up and he's like, PJ, you're always at these events, you're always at these Ruby things, but you never give a talk. And I said, well, I've got half an idea of something I might want to talk about someday. And he said, cool. And kind of walked out of the room, and we kind of assumed that he was going to, get some sodas or grab another slice of pizza or something. He comes back in the room. He goes, "Hey, I signed you up for a lightning talk." And I said, "You did what?"
That's a good place to start, right? Lightning talks.
It's the perfect place to start. So first actionable advice, start with a lightning talk, but not this way.
Right.
I was like, "Corey, I don't have slides." I said I had half of an idea. He's like, no, you're fine. You're going after me. I'm like, oh, geez, that's even worse. So I was watching the lightning talks, kind of trying to pick up tips and figure out how people were doing this. Didn't have time to put together slides. And my turn comes up and I get up on stage and I gave a talk about how you should treat your meetup like an open source project. It should have more than one maintainer. The community should drive the direction of where it goes. Things like this. And I finished in about 4 minutes instead of 5. And I walked off stage and I was like, well, check that off the bucket list. I have spoken at a conference. That's great. Don't need to worry about that. And I stepped outside to have a cigarette, to be perfectly honest, because that was a very harrowing experience. And a gentleman walked up to me and he said, hey, we're doing a Ruby conference in Kansas City in a few months. Would you be willing to go? And I looked at him right in the eye and I said, I don't know if I'm even allowed to do that. Because at the time, as you know, like I had moved from being a programmer to being more of a DevOps, sysadmin, SRE type with EngineYard, which was a cloud platform. And so I said, I don't know. That's like not really in my job description. And keep in mind, this is at a time, this is like 2012. There's no such thing as DevRel.
No, it wasn't. You had to invent it, right? You had to.
Yeah. It was like completely made up. People like this was the primordial ooze that DevRel was growing out of, was this idea that you would have someone who spoke at conferences. So I called my boss and I said, Sean, can I go speak at this? And he said, yeah, absolutely. That led to another talk in Tel Aviv that led to a talk in Lyon. Around that time, our mutual friend, Eamon Leonard, said, hey, I see that you're doing a bunch of talks. And I said, yeah. He said, why don't you ever come to Ireland? I said, well, I'd like to. He said, well, what do you think about starting a community team? And I said, what the hell is a community team? And he goes, I have no idea. Let's figure it out.
So this is in the context of EngineYard, right? You guys are both working in EngineYard at the time.
And that's kind of how it happened. We didn't call it DevRel. We called it a community team. We didn't call it, developer evangelism, because that sounded a little too like some marketing person had made up that term. Like we weren't going out and saying, rah, EngineYard's so great. We were writing content about how to build Ruby gems or how to do a node copter event or why Composer is the most important part of PHP. We were finding money for different programs so that these open source developers could develop the tools that our customers were benefiting from. We were, just trying to find opportunities to teach what was going on in these communities to as many people as we possibly could. And we never thought of it as, this is something we should be paid for outside of our regular, this was our regular job. And telling people got one of two reactions. Oh my God, you're the luckiest person in the world. And that's never going to last. There's no way that could possibly be a career choice. So that was 11 years ago.
And here we are.
I've gone through a lot of different phases of, the different aspects of DevRel. I've worked at large corporations. I've worked at tiny startups. I started the first ever, as far as I know, DevRel consultancy back in 2016, 2017. I've pretty much run the gamut of what you can do in DevRel. And I got to tell you, if you want to get into this, because I think where we started was, how does one get into this? You have to be willing to put in the miles. I think that's the key takeaway. You have to be willing to get up on stage. You have to be willing to write a blog post. You have to be willing to do a Twitch stream, make a video, write documentation, and you have to be able to interact with developers in some level. That doesn't necessarily mean writing code. That helps a lot. But not every DevRel team is a developer tool.
Yeah, we're not gatekeeping here, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it could be that that's what you need to do. It could be that that's not what your community needs right now. Yeah. So figure out what it is the community you want to work with needs and fill that gap.
PJ, there's a whole lot to unpack here, right? I'm just comparing.
That's what my therapist says.
I'm just comparing to my own experiences because for the first 10 years of my software development career, I was in a dark room coding.
Yeah, exactly.
Attend events at all, right? So you don't have to. It doesn't have to be in your blood. You can turn your life around. You can actually, talk to people,
Yeah.
and join communities.
I'm DevRel, and so can you. But no, I mean, it's funny you mention that, because one of the reasons why I've always been endeared to the Ruby community, a lot of it is down to my good friend Brian Lyles. I was working as a dev at that academic software company, and I was teaching. Like I was a Visual Fox Pro developer, big Microsoft developer, and that in and of itself is embarrassing.
That's
Visual Fox Pro
archaeology, man. That's
yeah. If you want to learn more about Visual Fox Pro, kids, head to local libraries.
and
But
no code is coming back. So
yeah, exactly. But yeah, Fox Pro is such a weird thing. But so we were doing that, and then that got end of lifed by Microsoft, and big panic. What do we do? And the head of development's like, well, Postgres does querying like Fox Pro does querying. Let's use Postgres. What works well with Postgres? Ruby on Rails. Can you learn it? And I was like, no, because I had kids, I had hockey practice, I had dance class to get to. Like, there's more important things on my weekend than learn Ruby on Rails. But we went to a meetup, met a bunch of the local folks, and then we got a free ticket to go to a conference called Voices That Matter, which was 100% an event to sell the book The Rails Way by Obi Fernandez. You will hear people in the Ruby community call it ObiConf, because that's what it was.
Oh yeah.
But the only events I had been to had been Fox Pro or corporate or academic events. So I walk into this place and I'm wearing, khaki pants and a blue button-up shirt because I'm carrying a legal pad, because that's what you take to a Visual Fox Pro event.
Oh yeah.
And I just told him to meet up with this lady who'd given us the ticket, and I met her, and I'm like, I'm not sure where to sit or anything like that. I don't know if there's assigned seats. And she says, well, have a seat here. And I sit down with Obi Fernandez, Tamer Soleil, and Brian Lyles. And these are all they're at the height. And on my other side was Sandy Metz. So the people at the height of their Ruby career, these people are Ruby famous, and I don't know, I have any idea who any of them are. I'd been doing Ruby for a week. And Brian leaned over to me and goes, hey, man, you don't look incredibly comfortable. I'm like, yeah, it's not. And everybody's wearing jeans and t-shirts and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't really know what to do. And he's like, well, how far is your hotel? It's right around the corner. He goes, go put on some jeans, grab a couple of these t-shirts these people are giving away for free. He goes, there's no need for you to be not relaxed.
Yeah.
And that simple gesture, that quiet conversation, first of all, sparked a friendship that's lasted 15 years so far, but also showed me the value of you take care of community members. You see someone who looks like they don't feel like they fit in, and you help them to feel like they do. And that's always been my attitude in DevRel. Find the person in the room who thinks they don't belong and help them to feel like they should.
Yeah, I guess that I've always been not jealous, but inspired by the Ruby community. It's always been one of those amazing communities that has been really kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been the kind of Node community, and we tried to bring that over. I think you lose something when it gets really, really big.
Yeah.
Then I went into microservices, which was kind of enterprisey and
right. I mean, but
it doesn't have the same spirit,
Yeah, no, every community is different. That's the one thing that I learned. And being on that team with Eamon and Engine Yard, we decided very early on. We started with, I was the Ruby guy, and Davey Shafik was the PHP guy, and Richard was our Node/Java guy, and that was that's who we were. That's what we did, and never the twain shall meet. And after 6 months, I was like, I want to go to your events. I need to see what it looks like on the other side. There's no way I can do this job properly and sit here and only work with one group of people. I need all of the people. Because the one thing that no one tells you when you're getting into DevRel is this is an addiction. And you become addicted to interacting with people, talking to people, hanging around with people, figuring out what they're doing, learning new ways of doing things. I could rewrite Hello World 1 million times over in every language I could possibly learn, just because it pushes the needle a little bit forward and it's exciting to me. I don't need to be, a computer scientist who's figuring out, exactly how to eliminate the N+1 problem in all of the querying languages minus indexing, because it takes too much time on various cloud platforms. I don't need to figure that out. What I need is, how do we help help people do things better with technology. And the more technology you learn, the constant learning, the constant talking to people, that's the part that gets really addictive.
It can have a transformative effect. I ended up writing a book on microservices because we invited Fred George, was one of the first guys to figure the whole thing out.
He's awesome.
To our meetup, right? And it was literally like, I was one of the co-organizers and trying to organize drinks or whatever, not really paying attention. It was magical. I was just watching this guy talk and I was like, oh my God, this is the way I'm going to build software now.
Exactly. And seeing that magical moment, if you can inspire that in people, like it's great to have that feeling, but if you can inspire that light bulb moment in people, there's nothing better than that. That's
that's why it's addictive, right? That's what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
You can change people's lives, literally. I mean, that's only software development. It is only, a job, but I don't know. You get to build things, and that does stuff. I think that does stuff for you.
Exactly. And to me, I think that their crossover comes when I look at my past and my present. The building of music and seeing the way that people react to that. That's not all that different from what we do in DevRel. You create a talk or you write, a piece of content and people react to it. And they're like, oh, this is amazing. Or even if like, that's absolute garbage. You're like, well, I've gotten a reaction out of you and I know what to do next.
I'm gonna pull my pro stand-up comedian move here and bring us all the way back to Guns and Roses.
Nice. It's the callback, folks. Here comes the callback.
Oh yeah, and I totally planned this. So I've read all the biographies the guys have written, and it's really interesting. You talk about your years in a band and building community around the music, and I can't remember which book it was, but when Guns N' Roses was coming up, they did all their own promo, right? And Slash drew the artwork for the flyers. Right. So it wasn't just like a bunch of guys who made music and then they got lucky. People forget the huge amount of community work that went into making that happen. They were there in LA, but they were immersed in that community. People don't know, like Guns N' Roses is kind of like version 5 of the band or something, right? It's like
exactly.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, it's funny because I always think back, whenever I think of Guns N' Roses, I think back to that first video of Welcome to the Jungle, where it starts with, so we're going back to when MTV used to show full form videos.
Yeah.
And there's like a few seconds before the music starts. And they show an Axl Rose, hair down, it's not puffed out yet, flannel shirt, if you'll excuse the term, shit kicker boots, and beat up jeans, stepping off a bus in Los Angeles, because he and he later admits in the biography, he was a hick from the Midwest that wanted to make it big in music and he didn't know how. And he showed up in LA and all of this was happening. But they had to hustle so hard to get from that kid who got off the bus to I'm stepping on stage and singing Welcome to the Jungle with the Whiskey A Go-Go.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you want to know how to do a startup, go read the Guns. Go read their books, because there's a lot to learn from that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so just bringing it back to our small real lives. The power of engaging with the community like that is awesome. And I think the thing that I feel is a little bit lost, or that people need to kind of keep front and center in mind, is the authenticity of the community. So back in those days, it was Heroku, it was Engine Yard, there was a couple of other people. Those are the only companies really selling to devs. Twilio, maybe, right? Who else was?
Yeah, but they were a baby at the time.
Yeah.
Rackspace. Like a lot of it was in that cloud PaaS space, that platform as a service space. And it was all because AWS was just too damn hard to use.
Yeah.
But there weren't a lot of. If you built a dev tool, no one knew about it.
Yeah.
Except for the small community of people who were using it. Like, other than that, you didn't see, like you do now, you didn't see gigantic banners on the floor of Web Summit where people are spending $20,000 for a 25-foot by 25-foot booth, to be like, hey, come and use Jira. Like, that wasn't a thing. Probably, maybe that's good. Maybe I'm becoming nostalgic.
The point you were making is So you guys were involved in any communities? You were, you were like, I'm going to write Hello World in a whole bunch of different languages. It's PHP or whatever it is. But it wasn't in the context of, oh, and by the way, use Engine Yard. It was just, we're going to support the community, right? And
yeah.
And I think maybe it's because we were all kind of naive or something. We kind of didn't connect the dots, but it really worked.
Well, yeah, I mean, there can be no metric because we're talking about DevRel. Let's put the word metric in there. But there can be no metric that shows you how much goodwill something will perform. And I'll give you another great example. When we were there at the first Distill, we launched MH Prompt, which is Mental Health Prompt, which is a speaker bureau specifically for people like Ed Finkler and Greg Boggess, Dr. Jenna Kulian, to talk about mental health issues in tech and to give them a platform to do it and some money to do it with. There was no way that would ever tie back to our product, other than the fact that it said sponsored by Engine Yard. But the goodwill it created in the community helped us so much. People were like, hey, these people are willing to put their money where their mouth is and say this particular issue matters. This issue of equity and diversity, this matters. And they're not just saying it. They're not just throwing money at it. They're trying to solve the problem. And that kind of goodwill goes so much further than we sponsored your booth at PyCon. Or we tossed some money towards your open source project. No, we probably got more. I don't know what the term is, but more under the radar business because of our ties to communities than we ever did because we were Engine Yard.
So I wonder, does that mean to do DevRel well? You need some sort of background in tech for sure. But before you do DevRel, you should put in some effort or experience communities in some way. And with you, it was music. Is that kind of a prerequisite?
I don't know, because some of these skills can be learned, but the prerequisite is you have to want to deal with people.
Yeah.
You have to be interested in what people are interested in. I would even say you could forego you can learn a tech background. You can pick up program. Anyone can learn that part of it. The technical part of it, learnable. The willingness to deal with people, even when they don't want to deal with you, is, I think, a much bigger key. We always said, at DevRel, our motto is, we go to where the community is. We do not expect the community to come to us. And you have to have that willingness to go to that pool, that community pool, and jump in, and then be willing to say hey, I don't want to be the only person in here. Let's come do this, wherever you are, let's jump in the pool with me. You have to have that willingness, even though some people might be like, I hate swimming. I'm stretching this metaphor way too far, but the idea is there. The idea that you really want to
for a lightning token, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's you get people into the thing that you're doing, they're going to want to be a part of it. When I was at Engine Yard, a lot of people, especially because the competition, they're like, "Oh, you and Heroku don't get along." And Terrence Lee and myself put together so many karaoke events because it was about the community and not about us. That people began to learn, oh, maybe it's not about the product. And we would even tell people at Engine Yard, listen, you're not ready for us. Go deploy on Heroku. Once you start to build the business up a little bit, you come to us. When you're, making some money or you're out of beta, that's fine. We're not going to be mad at you. We're not going to take your money and say, we got you, and then you're going to use a product that isn't right for you. There was this brutal honesty that we had that I think that is missing a little bit in the world of dev tools and even DevRel today.
Yeah. And I think the where that's most acute is there's a lot of companies these days that have to offer an API, that have to offer development services. We just released a project today for a client. We did 15 different integrations with third-party service providers. So I got to experience 15 different versions of DevRel and community engagement, and documentation quality, and oh boy.
Yeah, I'm sure that was fun.
From minus infinity to plus infinity, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you one of the people that we worked with, one of the clients we had at DevRel was a large scale bank that had 800 different API endpoints, and they needed documentation for every single one.
Wow.
And that was not fun. But we learned from their community, and I mean, we kind of let them take the lead and say, all right, what's missing? What do you think needs to be there? What's okay? What's completely unacceptable? What can we deal with for now? And we let the community lead it, and it's not a way a bank generally thinks.
No, it's totally antithetical, right? That they don't.
Exactly. So it was nice to get the opportunity and kind of get to work in that way, but it doesn't. You're lucky if you get to do that, and that's the thing that I think that we haven't touched on yet, Richard. Yeah. And that's DevRel in some ways boils down a little bit every once in a while to luck, being in the right place at the right time, meeting the right person. I mean, if I hadn't decided to bring my guitar that day, if I hadn't decided to skip lunch and hang out with Jim, would I be doing DevRel right now? Who knows?
Yeah. I haven't yet had anybody on this podcast or who I have spoken to who does this that didn't start out doing something else first.
Oh, absolutely.
That might be an accident of history. I mean, we may be entering a new era, right? Because it has been around for 10 years. So
yeah, and I think that it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it's something that we talked about a little bit on the Community Pulse podcast, and my compatriots there, Wesley and Jason and Mary, and we've discussed the fact that there was actually a lot of talk about it at DevRelCon in Prague end of last year, about the fact that it's becoming a thing. You're seeing more and more people saying oh, I don't come from a technical background, and I've never done development, and I've never done DevRel. I think I'd like to get into DevRel, and it's okay. That's an interesting turn of events. Or I've just graduated, or I've just finished a boot camp. I'd like to do DevRel. And it's I don't feel like it was usually something that someone we deliberately set out to say, I'm going to move to DevRel. That is definitely an occurrence of the last 5 years. And then over the last year, people who don't even have the technical background they know what DevRel is, and making a conscious decision to move towards it is I think going to come up with a whole new batch, a whole new look to the community of DevRel practitioners. And I don't have any foresight on what that's going to look like in the long run. I think that we kind of went through our rough years of let's focus on influencers, and that's, thank goodness, finally kind of going away. We saw that with some big companies buying out contracts and giving people ridiculous salaries and saying, well, you're an influencer and you have 50,000 followers on Instagram, you must be good at this job. And then realizing they couldn't actually lead a community.
Which is a totally different skill. Right? Totally.
Exactly. I mean, I'm not saying that's not valuable. I'm just saying that when you're supposed to be working with a community and you're making it about you, that's not going to work out. Yeah. It's got to be about the people that are out there, not yourself. That's just, I think these things though are going to change the face. And then there's, of course, we talked about this a little bit before we turned the mics on, but the economic situation. What is that?
Yeah, so I think we should kind of roll towards the end by covering that a little bit.
So let's hit the depressing stuff last.
Yeah, exactly. We'll end on a low note. We're moving into a minor key. These are cycles. I've been through 3. Don't worry, guys. It's going to go up again. But right now, it is interesting to see what is happening to DevRel positions and people being laid off. And the classic advice in a downturn is spend more on advertising and marketing. It always pays off, and people always make the mistake of cutting it instead.
Yep. I address this a little bit, on Twitter and Mastodon. In 2023, and please shout this from the mountaintops, everybody who hears it. The last thing you want to do is cut your DevRel teams. The last thing you want to do is cut your developer marketing teams. These are the people, especially if you're building dev tools, these are the people who are bringing developers to the table. It is not your cold call sales teams. It is not your product folks. I'm sorry, I hate to tell you that, but you might think you've built the best tool in the world. But if you don't have somebody to tell your story, no one's going to use it.
Yeah,
that's just a fact.
And I'll just refer back to this project that I was just involved with. The best performing developer service, they set up a custom Slack channel just for us, and they were highly responsive. They were a startup, right? They probably not more than about 50 people, but they had prioritized it. You could get access to some of the senior devs straight away. They didn't have the best documentation. They had a ton of bugs. They had serious missing features. But I love those guys. Totally.
Right.
We'll use again. Totally recommend to any. I'm safe recommending it to a client because I know they got my back.
Right.
Compared to another service that we use that has been around for a while, super comprehensive documentation. But we're trying to set up a specific integration, and how do I do it? I'm not going to spend a day reading documentation, and there's no talks on YouTube because it's totally commercial. There's no community.
Right.
It's just no. I mean, I'd look for somebody else.
Well, I mean, that's the biggest red flag to me when I'm looking at a new developer tool or I'm looking at a new language or whatever, is I will go to Stack Overflow or find out if there's a forum or some sort of public Slack or Discord. I hope it's not on Discord. We're adults, people. But in all seriousness, like if there's some sort of community conversations going on out there, I want to find that. And if there isn't one, that to me is a huge, huge waving red flag. That tells me that you don't understand who's cutting your meat. You don't understand who you're delivering to. There's no way for people to talk to each other about their experience they're having with what you've built. Here's a term that I will use that I'm glad that our current president of the United States has brought back. That's malarkey, people. That is it's no way to do business. Yeah. You must have a community around the things that you do. I talked about this with a lot of clients when they come to DevRel. Maybe you don't know there probably is a community already out there. You just don't know that they're your community yet. You don't know who they are. You need to find them and start talking to them.
Go buy them pizza. I mean,
Yeah. Easiest thing in the world. Send a packet of stickers and buy them a pizza.
Yeah. Literally. So I don't think anybody who's in this career or just starting out in this career in the space should feel too worried. Yeah, there's going to be stupid layoffs, and people in DevRel are going to feel some heat. But it is a great time to do a startup, as they say.
Yeah, I mean,
the next batch of really cool startups are going to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something I said earlier, kind of tongue in cheek to someone I was working with. But adversity really brings out who a person is. And right now, it's not a great time to be in DevRel. It's not a great time to be in tech, but it is a great time to start coming up with solutions. I think when we saw the last big bubble back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and people were like, "Oh no, this tech's going to go away." What you saw was kind of the bloated giants of things like, and here we go, dating myself again, AOL and Prodigy, and the way that people interacted online, Usenet and IRC, kind of becoming so hugely bloated that they fell over. But that's how people communicated. And now we have Facebook and Twitter and Stack Overflow, and these big giants are getting too big for their britches again. And you'll see the flop over, and you'll see certain things will survive the storm, no problem. Microsoft isn't going anywhere. IBM isn't going anywhere. Google's not going anywhere either. Facebook, I would love for you to just leave the field, just walk away, please.
of all of them, what does Facebook even do anymore, right?
Yeah, if I had to pick one piece of technology that we don't need anymore, it's Facebook. Twitter has a redemptive quality where Twitter is bad and then it's good and then it's bad and then it's good. That's always been its thing. It is the worst I've ever seen it right now, but it could come back. I think that too many people have decided that they want to build technology like Elon Musk. They want to build technology like Mark Zuckerberg. And that's why we're seeing some of the failures and announcements that we're seeing right now. Don't worry about that. What that generally means is there's going to be a whole group of developers and smart folks and and people that come up with easier, better, more open source solutions. And we're going to see a bigger boom that we will see a bust, I think, this time around.
Yeah, and we haven't even discussed Chat GPT or any of that fun, cool stuff.
Oh boy,
which I know
that's a whole other episode.
Right?
What's that?
I use it almost daily. It's very cool.
I definitely have used it for everything from like, it's mostly experimental. Like, could I create an abstract with Chat GPT? Yes, I could create an abstract. Could I build a website? Yes. Could I start a D&D campaign? Yes. Could I write a song? Yes. Chat GPT is cool, but like I think that I agree with Nick Cave, and boy, do I never say that. I agree with Nick Cave. It can do all these things, but it's kind of soulless. It doesn't have the moisture of experience, the lubrication that allows you to flow through life. It doesn't have that. I'm not saying it never will. It could be that, we create that. But at this point in time, I think that ChatGPT is a baby of what it's going to be. It is nascent. It is childlike almost.
Yeah, watch this space. And it's going to have some, I'm not going to predict anything, some interesting effects on DevRel for sure.
I 100% agree. And I think we're already seeing some of those. I've had some people ask, like, hey, I wrote some content using ChatGPT. And it's like, okay, I don't think that's what you're supposed to do. But I mean, to each their own. But again, Jason Hand, who I do the Community Pulse with, he works at Microsoft, and he's used it to do like, I have to put together a newsletter. What's the best way to take these topics? And if I feed them to ChatGPT, it'll kick me out and tell me what the best way to format this is, or the best way to send out a group email. Like, I think it's going to automate a lot of things, but I don't know that it's going to be the end all be all of everything. In the same way that I didn't think that VR was the best play for everyone, or that NFTs were ever a good idea. It's just what we're talking about now. That will change over the course of this year. I almost guarantee.
You have all these pieces of the board that don't fit, and somebody's figured it out. Okay, that is a high note. So we'll take that one, I think. And,
I mean, it all boils down to there's so much potential out there. Go out and grab it. Go out and grab it while you can.
Absolutely. PJ, thank you so much. This has been fabulous.
Richard, it's been great. Thank you so much for having me.
You can find the transcript of this podcast and any links mentioned on our podcast page at voxgig.com/podcast. Subscribe for weekly editions where we talk to the people who make the developer community work. For even more, read our newsletter. You can subscribe at voxgig.com/newsletter or follow our Twitter at Voxgig. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.